ESPN, the magazine's Tim Kuhn, who writes on ESPN.com, beneath the disgusting details of threats and taunts and racism lies an uncomfortable truth. The NFL needs Richie Incognito more than it needs Jonathan Martin. Coaches love players like Incognito. They look at guys like Martin, known as soft-spoken and thoughtful while at Stanford, with skepticism. Does he have the killer instinct? Does he care enough? Those questions don't apply to Incognito. Coaches might not want to see him after hours, but they love him on the field. He's indispensable, a tone setter, the guy who announces your team's presence with a crazed, through-the-whistle style that is prized at every level. Coaches chuckle among themselves. He might be a horrible human being, but he's our horrible human being. Sociopathic behavior from players at certain positions is not only tolerated, but cherished, end quote. And when ESPN analyst Bill Polian read this, he disagreed, recalling how his Colts dealt with Incognito on the draft board.
We took Richie Incognito off the board and drafted Ryan Deem, who had an electrical engineering degree from Northern Illinois. And we signed Jeff Saturday as a free agent. In Buffalo, I had Kent Hull, Will Wolford, House Ballard, all model citizens and great people. And we won a hell of a lot more games than any team Richie Incognito's been with. So the fact of the matter is that gentleman is flat wrong. I don't know where he derives that opinion from, but it's wrong.
So let's go to the source. ESPN's Tim Kuhn, who says football has made a pact with the devil. ESPN NFL business analyst Andrew Brandt, who has been both an agent and a front office executive, and ESPN's Danny Cannell, who quarterbacked 6 seasons in the National Football League. And Tim, I really would love to have had Bill Polian here. He has other assignments, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to just put a counterpoint to his observations about your observations about the NFL and what teams prize.
Well, Bob, I have no doubt that Bill Polian took Richie Incognito off his draft board. The fact remains that 3 teams employed Richie Incognito: the Rams, the Bills, and the Dolphins. The fact is, his ability to play just to the edge of lawlessness is valued. It's a valuable commodity. We heard Chris Carter talk about it. We've heard many people say this is Richie Incognito is more welcome back into the Dolphins locker room than Jonathan Martin. So while I have no doubt that Bill Polian didn't want Richie Incognito, he has been valued. His ability, the way that he plays the game, as long as it stays within the lines, is valued. And obviously, there's a long track record with Richie Incognito. He got tossed out of Nebraska. He left Oregon. He cost the Rams a playoff spot with 3 personal fouls in one game, and that led to his departure from St. Louis. So the fact is, he is a valued commodity in the NFL, and that's been shown by the evidence.
And playing on valuable contracts, as you point out. Danny Cannell, there is a theme here. We heard Chris Carter, Mike Golick, one of them, of course, CC is a Pro Football Hall of Famer, and you and I had a conversation earlier today. I get a sense, as I said, that there's a feeling, and even in the Dolphin locker room, you civilians just don't get it, what it takes to thrive and live in an NFL locker room, and this is overblown.
You know, I just want to hit on Tim's comments real quick, because I think he made an excellent point until he used the word sociopath. And I think that was probably what set off Bill Polian, too, because when coaches evaluate offensive linemen, the biggest compliment you can pay to an offensive lineman is that they're dirty, they're nasty, they like to get after it, that they have this edge about them. And I think where, Polian had an issue with it was where you're questioning somebody's mental state. And that could be a very real possibility for Richie Incognito. Getting back to your question, Bob, about the fact that I believe this has been vastly overblown by the media because we're dealing with some very polarizing buzzwords. When you start to talk about bullying, hazing, and get into some racial elements with the language that was used in that voicemail, look, in an NFL locker room, you get very desensitized to some of these issues. When you talk about financial issues, people on the outside look in and they say $15,000 or a $30,000 tab, and it sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But you're talking about players who are making millions of dollars, where you can basically, the way I've tried to equivalent is to take a decimal point off whatever you think is a big deal and subtract it. So it basically would have been like a $3,000 tab or a $1,500 tab. And typically in a typical situation, and I don't know the ins and outs of that locker room, but in a typical situation, because it was first reported that a $30,000 tab was paid for by one rookie who was making minimum salary of $400,000. If you can show me proof of that, yes, that is absolute abuse of the system. But in a typical situation, the bill for a rookie dinner is divided up by multiple rookies, and typically the higher draft picks who have higher incomes, they pick up a majority of the tab. And this is where it kind of caught fire. And I know, Bob, this is one of the toughest things to talk about, but when you go back to the voicemail message that was left, I have been in locker rooms where white players have addressed African American players using the N-word as a term of endearment, and it has been okay. It has not been a big deal. As I said, desensitized. You hear that word all the time in an NFL locker room, just like we heard Richie Incognito in that video at the start of the show used to Mike Pouncey, and there was no retribution. There was no offense taken, so obviously he felt comfortable saying that word. I would still prefer to hear the context in which the voicemail sounds. Was it vitriolic? Was he spewing anger at him? Or was he doing it in a jest, in a sort of playful manner?